the big thing that we're also seeing is often we look at the employees. Challenge or problem areas actually on manager level. We know that managers
Yeah.
are slightly more burnt out.
Yeah. So, welcome to Lomé Koekemoer. In fact, Professor Lomé Koekemoer, which I'm looking really forward to hearing this discussion all around well-being and psychological safety in the workspaces. Dr. Dineo and I continue to interview HR professionals, and now, well, a professor as well, in the field of well-being in the workspace. What works, what isn't, what should be being done, and all the good, bad, and ugly. So, Lomé, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
I'm really interested to hear your perspectives, not to hear me speak. So, what is your main area of focus? Please introduce yourself and then lead into something which is really either exciting you or depressing the hell out of you that isn't being done.
Sure. So, maybe to add on to just introduction, my background is psychology, so I'm a psychologist. I have been in consulting most of my career, so I work with organizations all the time. My passion, I suppose, would be all things neuroscience. I'm really passionate about leadership development. I'm really passionate about optimizing talent and how do we get people to really own or become the best versions of themselves, so really owning the full potential. And I think to the topic that you're mentioning, well-being is absolutely critical to that area. So having done a lot of work in the talent management space where we are identifying high potential, what does that look like in any particular organization, whether it's based, a big portion of it would be based on performance, how an individual is performing in their role, as well as how they show up in terms of future potential. And so for a long time, talent management was very focused on those two quadrants. What does your performance look like? What does the future potential look like? And as we've started to investigate, and we do work on those two axes, quite often, we've often just understood that there's a missing link. You could have a really good performance track record. You could have all the goods in terms of potential, strategic thinking capability, and the aspiration, and the leadership capability. But if you are not looking at well-being and resilience, that it's not going to show up in actuality, in reality. And so for the last 2-3 years, that's been something that we are very passionate about. At the company I work for is Yellow Seed Consulting. I'm also a professor of practice at Northwest University. And so, yeah, just understanding that missing link, we call it vitality. It's well-being plus resilience, and understanding how that impacts performance, how that impacts your potential, being able to show up as the best version of yourself, and how we help organizations, whether it's measuring it, whether it's developing it, whether it's tracking it, but how do we get better at understanding this concept of vitality? So super passionate about it, super passionate about the science behind it as well. Yeah.
So, what is this missing link? You've been studying this missing link in the vitality, and I love that word, well-being and resilience equals vitality. What is the missing link?
Yeah. So what we're seeing is that it is quite a complex concept, right? The concept of vitality. Even if you just look at the two components, well-being and resilience, well-being looks at physical, emotional, social, spiritual, financial well-being. And I think a lot of what organizations have focused on have been physical and emotional or psychological. So a lot of mental health and physical focus, which makes sense because I think that is probably the two levers that you can pull that might have the biggest impact. But it's really understanding what does that look like for the individual holistically, And even on the resilience side, there's many ways that you can assess resilience. Um, and it taps into quite a broad area as well. You could have physical resilience if you're an athlete and, your body being able to bounce back quite quickly.
Mm.
But what does that look like from a mental capacity point of view, from a emotional point of view? So quite complex in understanding the actual concept and getting to a way of measuring that. Um, but that really is the missing link. And I love the metaphor of a battery, of an energy battery. We have, and I get this picture of in South Africa with a lot of us needing to find alternative energy sources. In my garage, I've got this whole battery, a wall of battery packs. And if one goes down, we can still, do a lot of things, but we immediately need to lower down the expectations of what we're able to do. And
Mm.
so that's what we're seeing as that missing link is if your energy batteries are not refueled and recharged intentionally, proactively, um, the demand of performance, the demand of being able to actualize your potential becomes limited. And so, even in the practicality of well-being, we had a recent conversation about if your physical well-being is reduced, how does that actually impact the other batteries of
All right.
mental capacity and relational capacity, and vice versa, right? So, if you're going through a really struggling relational situation, how does that actually impact your mental capacity, your physical health? And we know that it's all interrelated. If that one battery goes down, it will impact every other battery, and
Yep.
it will impact your ability to perform and really actualize your full potential.
I love
So
that
yeah,
analogy. Yeah, because I use it actually
yeah,
when I'm doing my talks, that when I was in corporate, it felt like I was a battery slowly draining of life.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
just tapping in,
exactly,
tapping in, tapping in, and it puts more pressure on the other batteries. So the
exactly,
image of that is phenomenal. Love
yeah.
that. You've mentioned one word a couple of times, measure. So
Mm,
this is a key thing that's coming up more and more within the companies. Is they're saying the executives saying, well, what's the ROI? Which means that
yeah,
you've got to have a good measure in place. What are you
yeah,
seeing then as the most
yeah,
viable metrics to actually use in
yeah.
measuring well-being and resilience?
Such a good question. And maybe before I get to the ROI, I'm just supporting um, the shift of having strategic well-being efforts. So
Hmm.
we have a sentiment or a framework that talks about well-being 3.0 and moving from a 1.0, which is scattered. Here's a yoga session. Here's a wellness day. Here's some free fruit in the office. There you go. We're doing something on well-being to maybe a 2.0 that's there's a bit of a strategy and there might be a or a schedule of activities, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
We're ticking a lot more of the boxes to it being integrated into our strategy and enabling the key aspirational aspects of where our business is going. Because if our people thrive, they will drive our strategy. And so being able to pull metrics and levers that actually measure our ability to integrate well-being initiatives as a strategic enabler in the business, that's what I'm interested in, because that's going to move
Right.
the needle. If it's just, oh, okay, how do people experience that wellness talk? Or, were they able to list the stress management symptoms out of the training from an evaluation form? Those are all, you know, relatively solid metrics coming out of an intervention. Um, but I'm quite interested in the holistic, where are we really moving the needle to help the
Yes.
organization drive those strategic aspects? If we're, I just had a meeting with one of the big retailers who are growing and opening new stores at like lightning speed. And so, what does that look like for a new store leader and the strategy that we're trying to drive? How do we enable well-being for a store leader that is moving from store to store to store to
Mm.
open up, and drive the growth? What does that mean for the call center agent that's taking calls from irate clients all the time? So it has to be linked to strategy.
Mm.
So that would be a key metric for me, is how closely aligned are we with those strategic areas. And then I suppose, there's a lot of key things around, are we addressing it holistically? Are we integrating it into KPIs? Are we integrating it into policies? Are we, the big thing that we're also seeing is often we look at the employees, but the biggest uh, uh, challenge or problem area is actually on manager level. We know that managers
Yeah.
are slightly more burnt out statistically. Not that employees, that they're also, there's some issues there as well. But how do we really track? Because if the leader isn't able to put on their own mask, how will they put on the
Correct.
mask for their
Yes.
team? They're role modeling certain behaviors. So we often encourage a top-down approach in terms of measuring well-being. And there's lots of different assessment methods out there. Being a psychologist, I'm quite a big fan of psychometric testing because it's valid and reliable and has science backing it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not often viable, right? So that's not
Mm-hmm.
often um, uh, whether it's budget or time. But yeah, maybe I'm running ahead of the question that you had.
No, this is excellent conversation. I'm loving it. One of the key areas that you're identifying is saying it's top-down approach.
Mm,
Anybody that's I'm speaking to who is applying principles of well-being is just hitting a wall, hitting a ceiling,
yeah,
because the executives are blocking it, and that's where the question of the ROI always comes in. They're saying,
yeah,
we don't see it, especially amplified in Africa,
yeah,
where often the companies internationally owned, China, for example, all they're interested in is pulling out the money,
yeah,
and so there's no
yeah.
investment back into the people. So those dynamics are very different. What are you
Which is
seeing? Sorry, Karen.
which maybe just to highlight, which is why it's so important to be able to translate that for the executive team, that
Yes.
these are the business goals. So this is not a cost center. This is not okay, it is the right thing to do, but we need to translate it into business talk and
Mm.
business objectives. Why is well-being important for us to meet our KPIs, for us to drive our strategy, for us to be able to, hit that bottom line number that we're looking for? I think that's the work that we need to do as HR professionals. Because if we
Right.
don't, they'll never role model it. They'll never buy into it. They'll never give the budget that's required. So what's in it for me, I think, that is quite critical. They need to
Yep.
know what's in it for me as
So,
a COO, as a CEO, as a
yeah.
CFO.
Yeah. It's called what I call WIFM, the what's
Mm,
in it for me policy. The
yeah.
question that you're raising is to help them identify why is well-being initiatives such an important part of your overall company corporate strategies. If you've got that, how does the well-being initiative fits in there? Because they're not separate and you can't ignore them.
Yeah.
So asking the right question
Yeah.
so that they can answer, that's why it's important for me. So then
Yeah.
we need to, for
Yeah.
sure, love it.
Absolutely.
So you're working with companies in South Africa. What do you feel is the overall state of accepting that, amplified since COVID in the last 5 years,
Mm.
that well-being initiatives need to be re-looked at? Are companies actually waking up, or are you finding South Africa's lagging maybe the rest of the world?
That's a difficult question to, you know, place a South African lens on it. Obviously, different organizations are at different maturity stages.
Right.
From a profession point of view, I can tell you that is something that, as a organizational psychologist, and I'm quite heavily involved in our industry, it is something that, as an industry, we are targeting very intentionally.
Mm.
A lot of the conferences that we attended throughout the last 2 years have had the focus of we need to prioritize well-being. We need to prioritize resilience. We need to prioritize. I mean, this year AI obviously springing up as a secondary theme, or maybe a primary theme, but definitely an increase in focus, and an increase, I suppose, in really trying to figure it out practically, and not just, I think, during COVID, a lot of it was knee jerk and just
Sure.
surviving. And so now the conversation is, how do we really make an impact? Because I think a lot of the interventions and initiatives that were implemented in the last 4 years have perhaps not yielded the results that we
No.
had hoped it would.
Yeah.
If we look at the depression stats, if we look at the suicide stats of our country, all of it points to,
Not a
we
good
could be
sign.
doing
So
better. Yeah,
exactly. So this is the saying
yeah,
that is it the well-being initiatives that are broken, or is it that companies aren't adopting effective well-being initiatives for? I've had previous HR practitioners said fear is the executives have a fear. What if it doesn't work? It's going to cost a lot of money. Is it going to make me redundant because I don't understand the Gen Zs? Now you open up a whole different can of worms.
yeah, yeah,
So where is this? Let's be straight here. I cut to the chase. What is being done is not working.
yeah,
If it was, we wouldn't have a job. Okay, it's not working.
yeah,
Keeps us employed. Keeps you something to study and keep working on.
yeah,
What is needed? And it's not talk. Yes, there's discussion in conferences, and I've done talks in conferences where I rewrote an entire talk because all the HR people spoke about was the problem. Not one person said, here's a solution
yeah,
to the problem. We need to try this. We need to get in initiative. We need to accept change and stop fearing it.
yeah,
Where's the block?
yeah. So, and look, we're co experimenting
Yeah.
and co-exploring this topic together with colleagues and clients and many other scientists, etc. For me, being a scientist, I think I always want to start with, well, let's understand the human being, because this is a topic about the human being, right? So if we were able to understand the science behind productivity, the science behind rest, the science behind depression, well-being, stress, all of the aspects that actually encapsulate well-being. And if we move from that place, human-centered design, I'm an avid design thinking believer. If we start at that place and design interventions that are actually supportive of the human being, the science behind how the human being works. So practically, what does that look like? So if we understand, for example, deep focus and the ability to do deep work, which has a tremendous impact on if I am not allowed to do deep work because of the environmental constructs around me, and I'm constantly jumping from one meeting to another. I've got notifications on my phone the whole time. I'm in back-to-back virtual meetings. I don't eat. If we're creating that ecosystem, then mental fatigue will set in, because that's the way, scientifically, that's just how the
We're
human
designed.
brain is
Yeah.
designed.
Right.
And so when we need to be more intentional, we can't do superficial things. We need to put on a science hat. We need to think about, what is the ecosystem that we're creating? How are we bringing in rhythms of rest? It's been proven over and over and over again that we cannot perform if you are expected to do 8 hours of consistent mental alertness. That our brains just don't work that way. Yet that is the ecosystem that
That is.
many managers are put
Wow.
in, that we're creating, that we're co-creating.
It's amazing.
Um, yeah.
So
So
human
lots of
centered.
examples.
Yeah, human centered design. I'm aware of our time here. I've got one final question for you. And this is a bit of wizardry. If you had a magic wand and you could have companies put in any measures in place which are human centered, which are designed for the human in order to then flourish, and back to where you're talking about resilience and become resilient, so that everybody in a workspace, it's not just a place you go get a salary, but it's a place that you're transformed to grow. If you had a magic wand, what would you like to see put into place?
Sure. What a lovely question. I always like to start with, you have to start with the self. So if I could wave a wand and really heighten personal mastery, deep, self-awareness as a starting point of how you can only make change that you've experienced yourself. You can't give something that you don't have. And so if there could be a heightened awareness of what I need as an individual to thrive, to proactively address my well-being, number one, I'm then able to deploy tools that I've experienced myself. But then secondly, I'm also able to have a lot more compassion for others because I've been there. So maybe that would be one, and if I could wave a second wand, it would be.
You're holding the wand. You can wave as many.
I'm holding the wand, so let's go with another wand. Would really be empowering leaders, because I think that is where so much of the difference can be made, with leaders understanding that it's safe for me to act, because we're all human beings, we've been designed and made in a particular way. The world that we're in is not conducive to well-being. So if as a leader I'm able to say, this is tough, I need help, and really receiving that help in a real way, not just here's a well-being course, quickly go on a webinar and now everything you need to know, but really empowering leaders to help themselves, to help others, to be able to identify where there's pain points, to be able to give advice, to really be able to support their people. Sure. I think there could be such a significant impact there.
Amazing. We've spoken about a lot of things here, from strategic well-being 1.0 to 3.0, and I know you do lives, presentations as well, or sessions as well, which you post on LinkedIn. So I'm looking forward to joining that one that you've got coming up. Unfortunately, the recording will be coming out afterwards, so there's no point in putting it now. Right down to leaders having a heightened self-awareness in order to be able to then understand and say openly and with full compassion, I've been through it, this is what happened to me, and then they can be supportive of people beneath them who are going through the same issues. So Professor Lomé, thank you so much for your time today. I've greatly appreciated.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been lovely. I mean, I'd love to actually ask some of those questions to you as well and get some insights, but we'll have to do another call.
Well, I'd love that. Definitely. We go, Dr. Dineo and myself, we go live every Wednesday at 1:00, where we just share of some of the key findings that we've had in the prior week's interviews. And so far, it's been extremely enlightening. So let's stay connected.
Sure. Well, thank you for reaching out.
That's a great pleasure. Have a great day.